My name is Cindy Barker. I'm with the Seattle Emergency Communication Hubs, which is a group, a group of people that have come together to say, in a disaster, let's help our communities respond to what's going on, and we're in place in our communities while the city is getting its major response done. So that's what we'll cover today, and the important element that I want to talk about here at Field Day is how radio plays a role in that. So we're just going to cover the what, the why, the how it works, and then radio ops. So really, it's a really simple concept. It is just a gathering place where people can come to help each other after a disaster. We have people who have practiced what would that look like, how can that be organized and coordinated, but we don't have a lot of gear to do that. It's really around that gathering place to help each other, exchange resources. If somebody who has insulin and needs a refrigerator, how do you get that, that person to a place where they can keep their refrigeration? What we're not is, we aren't a government agency. We work with the city of Seattle. They're our kind of professional partners because they know about response. They can help us learn to do things better, but we're all citizen driven and citizen led. We are also not a couple of things. We're not shelters, right? My hub is in Morgan Junction, which is in the middle of a park. So that's where we're going to gather, but that's not where we would shelter. We would go work with the church to see if they could set up a shelter. We're also not a medications distribution place. We're not a first aid station, and we're not the grocery store. We don't cache food. We say what's available in the neighborhood and how can we utilize that. For example, in my neighborhood, we have several restaurants. Well, about 4 hours after an earthquake, they're going to be starting to go, we've got food that's going to start defrosting. Should we do with that? And we know some best practices that come out of disaster zones, which is how to make that food last longer, cook it off, get it distributed to people so it doesn't go to waste. You actually can use the resources that are in your neighborhood. But we don't cache anything. This is hard to see. I've got maps at my table back there, but there's 147 of these throughout the city. They're gathering places that we put on a map and designated. I got a little blow up there. Some of them have groups that have organized and they practice. Others are just designated as gathering places. And the city of Seattle offered up all the P-patch locations as gathering places because they're pretty well spread across the city. So people know that their local P-patch might be a place they can go. They may not have an active team, but once you get a group of people together interested in what just happened and what can we do, they will figure it out. So you have activated ones who've practiced and places to gather where people can really help each other when you go. And 71 of those are supported by those active teams. Since I've made this slide, we've grown. We keep adding hubs, so it's kind of like you always got to come back. We would stand up really only we're called the communications hubs because we would only stand up when there's no communications. Because when there's disasters, people want to know what's going on. I have to have information in order to decide how to respond as a person, right? Should I go to work? What hospitals are open? Is the city telling us to boil water? So communications was really our initial why we set up. And then it became, we're going to be little islands of people, and so we're going to have to work together while the city is responding to the much greater need. So we would really only stand up when that whole communications thing is broken and when it's safe for us to head out. If there's an earthquake in the middle of a snowstorm, we probably might not set up until the snow stops. But you have to be safe, and we have to have make sure our volunteers are okay with coming. They have to make sure their families are safe. So that's when we would set up. This is kind of really an important, I gotta make sure I'm not attached to something, a really important demonstration of preparedness in Seattle. So the city really looks to you and your family to be prepared. Because if you're prepared, you have food and water for 2 weeks, you know what your family plan is, you can come and help your neighbors, right? Whether you're helping your neighbor next to you or whether you come to the hub, you can be part of the people that are safe and can respond. If you work with your neighbors, the city has a program called Seattle Neighbors Actively Prepare. And that is a program where they will give you the material so you can organize your block around the topic of preparedness. So it's like Block Watch, except for preparedness. Then the community is where the hubs come in. So my Morgan Junction community has got 8,000 people in it, right? So hopefully each family's prepared, they're helping their neighbors, and what they would come to the hub for is the information that can go back to all the neighbors. But if I've got a nurse at one of these and this block doesn't need anybody, everybody's okay, come to the hub and see if they can offer their skills. So that's kind of why it's in a pyramid, and the last piece of the pyramid is the actual city services. And the services are going to be, we have 800,000, almost 800,000 people in Seattle now. So those services will be overwhelmed during that first response. Each department has a response plan, but it really is focused on critical infrastructure and vulnerable populations, our seniors, our folks who may not have had the economic means to store stuff, people who live in high-rise apartments who have no power and there's a senior in a wheelchair on the 41st floor, right? So they're going to be looking at how to make sure critical areas make it through. So that's why it's a pyramid, very small resources at the top. At any given time, there's about 208 firefighters on duty in the city of Seattle for 800,000 people. So you can see how information about can I get to a hospital is very important. Is it raining? Yeah. Wow. So we are all around the organizing, not so much the gear. But we do have gear cached in those organized hub areas, and it's really a pop-up shelter tent, a table, a couple of chairs, and a lot of communications, writing materials, whiteboards, maps. And so it's really intended to be stand up and start asking for tarps, asking for more tables, and setting up. And I know you cannot see the pictures. I've got a picture book at my station so you can come look at this later. But it all fits in a little 3x5 job box that we have stashed in the parks and stuff like that. So the main thing, I'm just going to walk through a couple parts of the area of the hub with the pictures, but like I talked, communications and information is really our key trade, which is why I'm here talking to the radio folks, because we don't magically, no internet, no phones, no cells. You're not going to hear anything except over ham radio. So that is kind of the linkage to the field day today. All this information in our practices comes over radio, or the other exception is, I send a kid who lives on Pigeon Point over and says, yep, the West Seattle Bridge is down, and we radio that back to everybody in West Seattle so that the only hospital you can get to is the one in Burien. So there's neighbor reported information, and then there's information that the city sends out as part of its response plan. Parts of the hub half of the hub is really focused on that information. And I'll show you some more pictures of it. Hello, guys. No input? Oh, okay. Sorry. So information is really, so we have the whiteboard I was just talking about. We have an area where people can post. Like, there's no need to have a bunch of volunteers in a hub going, there's a lost dog out there. Let the neighbors post that there's a lost dog out there, and then the other neighbors can help look for it. Or the Alzheimer patient that somehow has gotten out and is about, and we need to go look for them. The information area, I have these education posters. After a disaster, people who have not gotten ready or are really stressed and cannot remember, information to get you through. How many drops of bleach does it take to purify a gallon of water? I can't remember that on a good day. So, having these posters so that neighbors can come up and go, oh yeah, that's how you build a 2-bucket toilet system. Take a picture and take it back and share it with your neighbors, because if your phone is still working, at least it can take pictures, right? So that's the information side of it, and the action is what we have to practice, because somebody who needs that refrigerator for the insulin, how do we match them with the person who's got the generator and has hooked up a little dorm refrigerator for that sort of thing? How do we find the nurse, and what are we going to do with the nurse? How do we use kids and Boy Scouts, and how do we use pastors who can help calm people. Those are skills. And then how do you work the resources? You've got a building that's collapsed and you need shovels to try and get the debris off the sidewalk so people can get by. So those are the things we practice. And then each of those areas has a specific person, an educator, an information manager, a volunteer coordinator, and down here is our radio operator and our radio assistant. Because we found radio operators have got to listen and write and concentrate on the messages, and the radio assistant can help with the priorities and read his handwriting and make sure you can, before you hand it to the hub captain, you know what the message is intended to say. Dating it, stamping, all the things you do in the ham radio hobby are disciplines we use at the hubs, because otherwise you lose track of your messages. Did that message get responded to? And net control, we'll talk about that, is a highly valued skill. In a sample hub, often we have hubs that have a tennis court near them. My park is circular, so my hub does not look like this. It's more U-shaped. But you've got that action over here where you've got the information where that's the first place a community member can see and access, because everybody's going to want the information. Then if they need more help, more volunteer coordination, more resource sharing, they go a little further into the hub. And at the far back is the radio folks, because that we want to keep them away from the noise and the looky-loos so that they can focus and do their job. I want to emphasize that I'm turning my head this way, there's no one-size-fits-all hub. Every hub is a slightly different because the neighbors who live there know what's needed. Belltown's hub, high density, high vertical buildings, very little open space, looks very different than my hub. A lot of single family, some, I think the highest apartment complex we've got is 6 stories. So each hub kind of redesigns around what they expect is going to show up. Those people in the high density, they're going to need a lot of people either running supplies up to seniors who are trapped on those high floors, or a way to bring them down and get them into a shelter. My neighborhood has a lot of houses that are single family, wood construction. They're going to survive the earthquake. There are some neighborhoods with unreinforced masonry buildings that they're a high potential for collapse. So they have a kind of different preparedness plan in mind. You cannot see these pictures, I got them in my book, but this one is the community information area, and it shows the whiteboards and the maps. We have big maps that we can go, XX, don't go through the West Seattle Bridge, you can go to Burien taking this route. If we've heard if any of the other bridges, my mom used to live in Bellevue. I might have been interested at some point about I-5, or is 405 the only way I can get there, or can I go over I-90, or can I go over 520? So we can mark that information right on a map so people can see that. The needs and resources, I have some samples over at the table. Those are forms that we fill out to do that matching. I've got shovels, I need shovels. How do you track that? We do not have people bring stuff to the hub, because we can just imagine in a disaster, people want to help. They'll go, what can I bring to help? I'm sure they'll need blankets. I'm going to bring all my old crappy blankets and dump them on the hub because they'll use them somehow. Well, if I didn't open a shelter, now I've got blankets that I've got to take care of. Food attracts rodents, so we definitely don't want food sitting there, being a problem for us. So that matching activity is really important, just neighbor to neighbor direct handoff. In the volunteer area, I talked a little bit about that. We're looking for people with trade skills, plumbers, electricians, anybody who's got the make your household work in a disaster sort of things. And we call it MacGyvering, like how can I put a tarp up over the front of my wall that collapsed? Or how can we help neighbors whose windows might have gotten broken, just board them up? There's some seniors who can't even do that. So how can we use our trades? How can we use medical? We have a lot of communities that people English is not their first language, and under stress it gets even harder. So where's our translators that can help us? Because all communities have people with from different backgrounds, and how can we work that? And sign language interpreters. So we have tools to help do that. I put scouts in there because, man, I want more scouts come help do, because they can do anything. They can be those runners, and you'll see pictures of scouts who've run radios for us. The hams, so the ham attraction for us is that ham radio people are can-do people. If you've got a ham shack, you've gone through the how can I make this work phase of your life, you know? So you're really good at MacGyvering, you're really good at looking at something and going, well, I need to figure out how to do this. So those field skills are super important for us. And you're also really flexible. If something didn't work, you back up and you try it again. That's what's going to make a hub work. It's not going to all be perfect. Nothing unspools according to plan. You have to adapt, and those adaptable skills are really important. The next one is oriented to problem solving, right? You're trying to get back on the air. How do you get to that? So if you have a problem, those skills are kind of inbred into the ham radio trade. And technically adaptive, because if you're running a radio for a hub, it's going to be you will not have the connectors that you thought you had put in. We find in drill after drill, people thought that their power was charged up and it wasn't. So how do we get you your power back? So that adaptive thinking is really important too. Connected to the radio community means that even whether you're a hobbyist or whether you're an MCOM sort of person, you know all the other ham radio operators. You've run into them at events like this. And so those relationships are really good because you can go, I know a guy in the West Seattle Radio Club who's probably got these connectors I need. Somebody go over to his house and send him up here with his toolkit, right? So we can work each other because you've got those relationships already built in. And the last one is you actually are really fun people. We need people who can come into these situations and like, chill, here we go, and have a sense of humor about what's really going on, but still be kind of professional about what you need to do, but help lower the stress level for the rest of us. And then in the actual operations, so without it getting too complicated, because it kind of is, my radios at a hub are GMRS. So we did that intentionally. It's ground mobile radio service. So that we can have neighbors get a license without testing, and I can talk to any of the hubs in West Seattle. So we've got the guy in the sling is our repeater manager. We've got 4 repeaters across Seattle, and those allow us to talk not just in the southwest sector here on the West Seattle Peninsula and South Park, but any hub across the city, as long as those 4 repeaters are operating. So we can talk to each other, but we need the connection from ham into the city about what is that information. So ham radio operators are the ones transmitting, and that's the ACS team. So we can sit and we can listen to those messages, but in order to have communications between the local group and the city or the field sector teams, we need ham radio operators to help us with that. So net control is the other skill that ham radio operators bring to us. My neighbors who have those GRMS licenses, we have to do a lot of training to them to understand for the 14 hubs in West Seattle, what it's going to be like trying to find out what does Alki need, or trying to see if any other hub has got nurses that they can send to another hub. You have to have that pattern, the ability to call and answer. And the things that make a dialogue with multiple people across the radio work smoothly. So Matt is probably going to be one of our key guys to develop that net control training class. And if we have no radio operators, we're using kids on bikes, right? And that just takes time. So that's why radio is so much more essential for us. I'll pause there and ask if there's any questions, because I'll keep going, but okay. So these are some of the pictures of our radio operations that we've had. It's really a tarp setup. We have tried things. The ACS team has worked with us to do WinLink passing messages using PDFs. So I get a message from the city that says, here's the 3 important things. Boil water, Swedish is closed, both the floating bridges are closed. I need to get that out to the community so I can post that. If I hear that over the radio, I can post that. But I don't have a way to translate that into the 7 languages that are in Seattle, but the city does. So in the Office of Emergency Management, Emergency Operations Center, they can provide those translations of those 3 messages, put it on a PDF, send it to across WinLink to a ACS radio station. They print them, and I can post them at my hub. So we've practiced that. So there's ways to be able to help our whole community with the talent that you guys have. So radio operations is super important to us. And then there's one more component that I'm going to talk about that's radio operations. So the Red Cross used to have a website, used to be being the operative word, called Safe and Well. So in a disaster, all communications down, you could go to a Red Cross shelter and they would be able to have internet set up and a website where a person could say, I'm okay, Aunt Louise, I'm in this shelter and we're going to stay here. And that would go to a web-based program where my Aunt Louise could go, is Cindi okay? So she could go to that website, type in my name, type in some other critical identifying information so that they know Aunt Louise is really looking for me, and it would pop up and say, yes, she's in this shelter. So they would know that I'm okay. The Red Cross lost the license to that, and for a couple of years they used the license from Australia or New Zealand, and then they lost that. So right now, there is no, if there's power out, there is no way to get a message to Aunt Louise. Cell phones went down, internet went down before I could send a text out. So there'll be a few who can get that out, but the bulk of our 800,000 people are not going to get that message out in time. So we worked with a whole series of people in the MCOM, amateur radio groups, and the hubs to develop a program called I Am Safe, which is basically, we're going to be able to send Aunt Louise an email or a text saying, we're okay, and we use WinLink to do that. Bill in 6NBN is setting up a demonstration station showing you how to do this. We've got the forums. You can send yourself an I Am Safe message today. That's the point of why we did that. But it's the need for people to say, I'm okay, to somebody outside the area so that that person can then post it on their social media so that everybody else who's worried about me knows that I'm okay. Even better than the Red Cross thing, because then that way it gets out and everybody sees it. And unfortunately, it's the lowest priority in INCOM. So all our ACS people are going to be around that, deploying information for the departments to work on, for general citizens, to keep getting information to the PIOs so that Cairo can continue to broadcast what citizens need. I Am Safe messages is super low in that priority, even though it's the highest priority for the affected community. So we went, then we should be able to fill that gap. And you have to have something that you can deploy outside of everybody else's operational system. So what we put together is a packet of material that we started working on 2022, a packet of material that we can just hand to a hub and go, here is everything a radio operator needs to know, go to work. So as long as you've got the equipment and the WinLink connection set up, you can do it. Really it's around, are we okay? The guiding principles that we use to set that up are make it really easy, really easy. Hand the form off, fill it out. Hey, Aunt Louise, I'm okay, I'm staying at a hotel. Hand it off, and then we can process that at the hub right then, or we can queue it up and do it at night when MCOM traffic drops off, right? So we have sensitivity to the radio wave. The radio bands are going to be filled with people trying to communicate. So how can we maximize that? This is the flow. It's really like, I want to tell my loved one I'm okay. Okay, capturing that information, passing it on. We can digitize that information and put it into forms so that all the ham radio operator has to do is upload the form, put in a little bit of information for the system to process, and send it. So it becomes a very fast offline type process. We spend the typing time not at the expense of the ham radio operator, but a volunteer who can type those forms in, then the ham radio operator, who's the only one licensed to be able to send those, boom, 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 boom. And really this is around, we have signage to help people fill out that form because there's limitations, like 25 words, because some of these messages might have to go into the national traffic system and they've got a 25-word limit. So we've just kind of built it around so it fits within every MCOM principle right now, but it makes it fast and speedy for us. That's the collecting it at the hub, and then in between there is that digitizer operation. So part of the tools, these are 2 pages. This shows you the whole process in one. You'll have to come look at it over there. The whole process, and it really is around, I'm going to have to look here. You have the person who comes up. What are the tools we have available for that person? That's that sign. Here's how you construct your message. Then you've got your intake table. They've got the forms. They've got the tip sheet on before the person walks away. Make sure you filled in the information that's needed. You know, they might get stressed out and forget the @gmail.com. You know, I see that all the time. Can you read their handwriting? You know, is a person who's going to type this in 6 hours later going to be able to successfully do that? So that's what the intake table really manages. Then we have the third one is converted into digital form. You know, they've got a checklist of things that they look for. And then the ham radio operator. And each of those tools is listed down below. In each packet, we've got 2 thumb drives, right? So that you can pass, you know, like I can type 50 messages in, I can pass the thumb drive to my radio operator. He gives back the one that he's already sent, so you have this circular thing. And you have thumb drives already loaded with the programs for WinLink. You're not going at the day of the disaster, oopsie, can't get to the internet. How am I going to download these forms from WinLink? And this is the back side of it, which helps people remember what the flow looks like, the form, and then the tips on how to make this process work. Oops. So that's what I'm covering today. All this is going to be over there. You can ask questions over there and look at stuff, and I've got pictures. So any questions? So hopefully I've convinced you to go to engage with your hub, because we all want to meet our ham radio operators, even if we never see you again until the disaster. You know, at least we know you're in our community. So I know all my local hams in Morgan Junction, as well as West Seattle, which is part of why I'm part of the radio club. I want to acknowledge Matt Blank, who's one of our hub captains in Ravenna. Rita Whitman and John Kimball are our hub captains at the Salvation Army down here in South Highland Park. And Ron's our repeater manager. And I don't see any other hub captains here yet. So we're all working together on the same stuff. And it's a fun hobby, and I appreciate you guys coming and sitting and listening to this. So, any questions? All right. Thank you, Matt.